Hello again. It's Friday, March the 10th, and this is Weekly News Watch, a collaboration between Cecil TV and the Cecil Whig. On this show, we talk with the Whig's Matt Hubbard about some of the week's important local topics. Hello, Matt. You've covered a number of stories this week. I'd like to start with the Board of Education. They've decided to begin two-way dialogue sessions with the public. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so during the Board of Education's March meeting, they introduced a proposed change to the Board of Education meeting policies. This change just adds an entire section called limited public forum or something like that. But basically what it allows is it allows people from the public, so like they would participate in public participation where they would speak at the Board of Education. This opens the floor to allow them to speak with the Board of Education. So if they had a direct question for Superintendent Lawson, they could ask the question to him and he'd be able to respond. If they had something to say to Howley, same thing, right? These meetings can go on whenever, when I asked about it, because it is worded a bit strange, and the meetings can be like their own independent thing. They can be hosted at CAC committee meetings. They can be hosted after work sessions. They're going to have their own timeline, it seems, but that's further to be elaborated on as, you know, in April is when they actually vote on it and make amendments as needed.
Right. I think what it seems to say that one of the options was they could go out somewhere, like go to a school, and which is probably be a good thing. I wonder if they should even limit it to people with kids in that school. So
well, another interesting thing too was that it was noted that upon request and the nature of the conversation, right, you can request to speak with other CCPS staff. So Cecil County Public School teachers, like you can request for them to be there as well, depending on the nature. Like there's probably a whole gamut of things that need to be met in order for like a teacher to be present there, or a specific janitor per se, right? So there's a lot that can happen with it. It's very rough right now. They're gonna dial it up and then they're gonna vote on it in April.
Right. I mean, in theory, it sounds like a great idea. I hope that it doesn't, deteriorate into a, I mean, the people who have the tendency to come and shout, they might not. I mean, that then it turns into some kind of argument or whatever. If they're not happy with the response, what do they do then?
Yeah, and I think that it's an idea that can go one or two ways, or three ways. They can be great, and they can dispel a lot of misconceptions that people may have, or it could become hostile, or it could just be very well received, and Cecil County Board of Education takes a step further.
Right,
so.
and related to this, I think it was last week, Phyllis Kilby made a comment at the legislative meeting that she had this discussion with Donna Culberson about how a more interactive meeting at the school board could be beneficial. And she said, well, and then went further to say that an interactive type of dialogue at the county meetings might be because there is a certain people come in with their problems and their questions and whatever, and the council just sort of sits there, and by the rules they can't say anything.
Yeah, and see, I don't know if that's because the council has meetings like more frequently a month than the Board of Education, but the Board of Education, you'll see like per meeting there's at least 3 public participation speakers, right? Council, I mean, you're lucky to get 1 or 2. Right. Most recently, though, like going back to what you were saying, most recently at that same council meeting, there was a lady who got up and she started talking about the PFAS chemicals and how she had to get a reverse osmosis system put into her house and how it's costing her a lot of money. And she has 13.9 parts per trillion of PFAS chemicals in her water. That's not terrible, but that's still a presence you don't want in your drinking water. Right. And then when it got into and the council talking about it, it became a two-way dialogue, and Jackie Gregory had to kind of stop it, like, oh, no, we don't need that. But that would have been very beneficial because it would have been
Right.
able to take it a step further,
The the part of that whole discussion that amazed me was, I believe it was Councilman Meffley saying they had not been contacted in any way by the parties of this what is this basic at this point, just a potential lawsuit.
Well,
But
and
that's amazing.
So
It is very surprising to me that something so potentially have economic impact, health impacts, etc.
Yeah.
That
Well,
there's
it is and it isn't surprising. So you get these government officials, and we see it all the time with Love Canal in Niagara Falls, where school and that whole neighborhood was built on top of a chemical wasteland, right? You see it like that. The government gets involved and people expect them to actually do something. Well, to actually do something, it costs money, right? And the PFAS chemicals, out of all the things they don't know, they do know that it's very expensive to get out of water. So it only makes sense that the EPA, the MDE, and a lot of these people haven't informed the government, or the government hasn't gotten involved just yet because they don't know the sheer scope of it. And if you throw your hat in the ring, you're going to be expected as a public official to make a change, and changes cost money, and especially with public health. So I'm not surprised, but hopefully that'll change in the future.
right. And without concrete information, their comments one way or the other are just likely to backfire.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, moving from public education to private education, you reported on the centuries-old West Nottingham Academy's alliance with a Canadian-based charity, Casa Lakshmi. What should we know about this?
So there's a lot to know about this. The biggest thing that I will say is that WNA, they had a fall in enrollment due to COVID-19. Their operating expenses per their tax return. Their operating expenses are like just over $5 million, and their revenue is just over $4 million. So there's a $1 million discrepancy in their revenue and how much they spend, to operate the school. That doesn't include capital expenditures, I don't think, and so there's a plethora of money, and they had this endowment that they drained 2 years ago due to what I was told, the sheer operating costs of the school. It drained their entire endowment, right? Casa Lakshmi came in when WNA wanted to sell back in 2020, and that's how they started their partnership. And so there was no buyout, no selling. They're both nonprofits, so that's not possible, right? So WNA is basically allowing Casa Lakshmi to cover the remaining operation expenses that the school has, that the revenue just doesn't cover, right? So that being said, Casa Lakshmi, this international charitable foundation, when I asked them how they get their money, because there's a lot of speculation about this company, okay? You got to take a step back here and look at it from a broad picture. These guys were going to build this huge 200-acre luxury. It looked like a luxury 5-star resort, right on the water in Panama City, Florida. And that they've been sitting on those plans for like 3 years. And if you look into it, there's a lot of news articles basically saying like they're not doing it anymore. They got the land zone to build this and everything, and they just kind of didn't do it, right? I'm not going to say abandoned, because when I asked them, they said, oh, COVID got in the way. And so then they said that they then transferred their focus from their school in Panama City, Florida to WNA because WNA needed so much help, right? Well, my question is, where does the money come from? How does Casa Lakshmi get its money, right? Well, you look at their board of, trustees, and you look at all of their founding members, and they're all over the world. You have people from Switzerland, Canada, United States, like they're all over the place. But I was told that they get their money from their members making contributions, donations, and soft loans, right? You look at their tax returns, they have a $6 million assets, right? $6 million in assets, which, they wouldn't disclose to me if they gave money straight up to WNA or if they're just going to cover the money for the future, right? But what I was told is that moving forward, Casa Lakshmi is going to cover the remaining remaining expenses that revenue does not cover, but it's only operational costs, right? So we're just gonna have to see where this kind of goes. There's a few things that don't make sense that we're trying to work out, but all in all, it's a partnership that has a crazy expansion plan to it.
Right. Even if Casa Lakshmi can, cover debts and make them, financially sound, they still need a business plan that works, right? They can't continue to operate in the black. And the other interesting part about Casa Lakshmi, if you look at their their mission statement, it includes educating people from lower income. So, and they talk about increasing the student body. Adding on K through, I guess,
K through 12.
K through 12. So, I don't know. It's a change. It's incredible that we only found out about this last week. Of course, these are private organizations. They're not obliged to publicize their activities, but West Nottingham is the oldest continuously operating boarding school in the country, and it is certainly a landmark, and many people I'm sure are interested in its what happens to it. Who knew they were on the brink of bankruptcy and closing? I mean, that's a bit shocking.
And that's a big question that I have, was how much debt was the school in, right? Nobody was able to answer me on how much debt this school had, right? They just said, we drained our endowment 2 years ago. So this school that's been around for 280 years drained its entire endowment, right? So it kind of does make you speculate how much was that debt, and how much rebuilding will Casa Lakshmi have to do to get them back on their feet. Casa Lakshmi said that it's going to take 18 to 24 months to get WNA back to a stable financial position. Once they do that, and they're going to kind of break up the school, right? They're going to have half of the school. This is what Casa Lakshmi told me. They're going to have half of the school pay full tuition, and then they're going to have a third or so pay about, like financial assistance through Casa Lakshmi, and then they're going to have a population of students from Cecil County that are low income go to the school for free. So they're going to grow this school by giving more financial assistance, right, to the local population. A big question a lot of people have was, is this going to become just an international only school? That's not true. It's going to expand into Cecil County, and it's going to get a lot of the lower income students to go to the school through financial assistance provided by Casa Lakshmi in the future.
So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And finally, during this week's County Council work session, the presentation of the 2023 budget by Budget Director Sean McCullum featured a lengthy detour into the subject of vehicle purchasing that would seem to indicate a U-turn in how the county acquires its cars and trucks. What was your takeaway from that discussion?
So it's an $8 million buyout. It's one of the pricier things that were talked about. From my understanding, they were leasing cars through Enterprise. They realized, with this new finance director, that this isn't financially feasible, right? You're going to end up losing money in the long run. So they're trying to buy out of their leases, which I'm not too sure what happens after they buy out their leases. I'm still working on this piece, but they're going to buy out this lease with $8 million, right? And then from there, Sean McCullum said that if the county is in a great financial position in the future, they will buy vehicles outright because they will save interest points, or they will save some sort of percentage for the long run. So they're now looking to the long run and the future for the county and what's financially feasible for vehicles and giving their employees cars.
But the strange thing is that they're still, I guess it's because they have vehicles on order. They're still going to begin the leases on some number of cars, but then once those are delivered, then they're going to buy them out. So
yeah, there's a lot of
tricky situation.
Yeah, there's a lot of intricacies to this because, I mean, obviously, if the supply chain issues weren't a thing, then this wouldn't necessarily be this multifaceted, complex situation, right? You just cancel leases, buy cars if you have the money, right? They're saying that there's back orders. They can't just buy cars because there's so many back orders and they would need so many cars. So it definitely has a bit of a gray area that, as I said, I'm still working on to understand from the county's perspective as to what's going to happen going forward. From what I understand right now is it's going to be more financially feasible. It's going to save the county money, and it's going to be a smarter way to afford transportation on the county level.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's kind of all I have for this week. So I guess once again, Matt, thanks. And
thanks.
And we'll do this again next week.
Absolutely.